Welcome back to A Beginner's Guide to Taping, day 2. So on your second day, after all of your tape is set and fully dry, it's time to coat it. And the coating thickness, or I should say the mud thickness for this coat is pretty specific. So right here in this bucket, I have mud that was used for a skim coat on my last job. So it's really runny. If I can pour the mud, it's way too thin for a first coat. So we got to get some of this out of here so that I can get it to the right consistency. Keep it clean. Clean buckets, clean work. So my preferred mud is this light line. It is a lightweight all-purpose. It's the same mud as USG +3. This is just the Canadian equivalent. Not too hard, not too soft. You can tape with it in a pinch. It's good stuff. Oh, that is wet too. But I'm just gonna put about half of this bag in here just to thicken it up. Now, if you get a good look at this mud, this is how it comes in boxes or buckets before you mix it. There's so much air in here. If you start trying to spread this stuff, it just won't go on nicely. Let's see what this looks like when we put it on the wall. So you can see all of those bubbles in there. That's just, it doesn't look good. And you have to wipe it so much to try and get those out that you end up taking too much material off. So it's just not acceptable, right? Let's give this a quick spin. That's pretty good. Look how creamy that is. All right, let's see how this spreads this time. You can see it's just more workable, right? There's still a bit of porosity, but feather, feather, pass, done. It's less work. So we jumped ahead a little bit there. I haven't even showed you how to handle mud with a hawk and trowel, should you choose to use one. I'll also show you how to do a flat joint with a knife, but basically when you use this, you have to tilt it like that, so you're kind of holding the mud like that. And you can do it on one side of the blade, or I can flip the trowel around and I can do it on the other side of the blade, depending on if I'm going this way or this way. We'll get a little bit more mud on here. And you don't always need to take it all off. That's gonna get a little messy and cumbersome. You can also just like scoop a little bit off. You have to be fast if you have your mud this loose. I would recommend just messing around with this a day or two before you even start putting it on the wall. Like just mix up a bucket and just kind of play around with this stuff because you're going to drop some, as you can see. Okay, so let's show you how to do a flat joint first. I'm gonna get it on this side of my trowel, just a quick little scoop. And then I just push. And as you push, you start and then you sort of slope it down like this. So it starts like this. Not so exaggerated, but that's the general idea. I'm gonna do another one. And these are the joints that are supposed to wind up flat. You remember, you can see that little bit of light there. So I think we've gone far enough with this joint that we can do the finishing passes. So that was the loading pass. So I'm going to flex my blade like this. Feather. And you can see what happens if you don't scrape off the chunks off the wall first. Feather. Now I'm feathering the top, same thing. I'm pressing down on the blade like this, bending it. The reason we feather, less sanding. And generally, you should only need one pass, maybe two, to kind of take down the rest of the porosity and leave a thin coat over top of this. We don't want to leave much because remember, this is a flat joint, not a humped joint, right? We're not trying to make a hump in the wall. So as we can see, there's just a little bit more room for the next fill, but it's generally quite flat. Okay, let's finish this off. I'll usually start where I left off Okay, and go to the other side of my blade. Okay, we've got a nice, pretty even spread. Feather, feather, finish. And I've left a bit of a heavy edge right here, so I'm gonna do one more pass, a feathering pass. So next I'm gonna show you how to do it with a knife. A lot of people are gonna find a knife easier. I got used to a trowel, so it's not as easy, but when you're using a knife, you can use 2 fingers on the blade like that to kind of help give it some more pressure. And a knife and a hock is pretty good. Knife in a pan is the preferred method for most people, but get that mud on there and you pull. So I kind of feel like the difference between a knife and a trowel is a knife is like front wheel drive. You're like dragging it the way a car would, the way a front wheel car, oh, words, the way a front wheel drive car drags the rest of the car behind it, right? Okay, feather, feather, finish. I mean, it definitely does a great job, but I just find I'm a little slower. Whereas a trowel, you have the power behind you, which is why I find I can spread more mud faster. But for flat joints, the knife was really nice and easy. Okay, now I'm gonna show you how to coat a butt joint, and we're gonna try and keep this pretty simple. So a butt joint, as you can see, does not have a recess for the mud to go in. So we have to build it out wider. And on most butt joints, as long as there's nothing too unusual going on, then I just coat them 2 trowel widths wide. This is a 12" by 5" trowel. It's a flat trowel as well. There's no hook in this one. A lot of the ones you see at Home Depot and places like that will have a convex curve in it, and that's to build a perfect little hump in the wall. Most people will only use them for flat joints or corner beads. They don't work nicely for butt joints because they're not wide enough. I just use a straight flat trowel for everything. I'll link some really good ones in the description if you're looking for it. Okay, so butt joints. Get a lot of mud on, start at the bottom, load a nice even spread. I know this is not gonna be as easy for you guys, but this is the general idea. Load from the bottom, get a nice even spread all the way up to the top. Normally I would recommend doing the butt joints first so you're not having to tie into the flats. I'm just gonna pretend we haven't done the flats. So, feather, feather this side. Okay, the next pass is just going to be flat. I'm not putting pressure this way, I'm not putting it this way. It's just a pretty flat pass to knock that stuff down. And we're also pushing the mud into the center of the joint. As you can see, most of the mud is there. Also, as you can see, I took too much off. I don't like being able to see the tape like that, so I'm actually gonna put a little more on. One more time. I'm gonna push that mud to the center of the tape. This is what we call a tool line or a lift off. You can see it's a sort of proud spot where the mud sticks up a bit more. I'm now gonna do one more pass over top of this. Looks like we could feather this edge real quick. But here's what I've done. I've left a lift off here, which is a little high spot that will need to be sanded. I've left a little lift off here, which is a little high spot that needs to be sanded. And this part over the tape is a broad flat spot now. I do this specifically because it shrinks the most right here and right here. That's why I left my high spots, a quick sand, and we've got a generally quite long flat spot. When you're building out butt joints, you're only trying to create the illusion of flat. With a flat joint on a wall here with the 2 tapered edges, you can actually make a flat joint. On this, we're just creating the illusion of flat. I also have plenty more videos on my channel about coating butt joints and all the stuff for it. So if you want to do a deep dive into all those old videos, feel free. There's way more information, but that's the general idea of how to do a butt joint. Okay, next we have corner bead. And if we look at the clearly defined lines on here, this line right here is where the nosing starts. As you can see, there's a clearly defined edge to fill, so there's a start and a finish. Start, finish. Okay, so here is how to coat the corner bead. Get a nice blob on the trowel, and I wipe against the edge of the bead. You want to leave it full, so that's why I kind of do a motion like that. The other reason I do a motion like that is if I go straight up, or if I even go like this by accident, look what happens. See these big blobs? We don't want that. So that's why when I load a corner bead, I go in this direction. Leaves it nice and clean. Okay, so that's not full there. Now we're gonna feather. And this mud has too much porosity in it. I'm just doing one pass down, and then I'm gonna do one pass. I'm not pushing too hard. You don't wanna empty out the bead. So that's pretty good. For a first coat, we don't wanna take any more off. I'm happy with that. Okay, now we got another side that's a little trickier because if we load it like this, it's gonna all puke off of this edge right here. So how I'm going to be loading this one is a little different. I'm just gonna go like this. And you can do this with a knife too. Doing a corner bead with a knife is more or less the same principle. I find I can definitely load corner bead faster with a trowel. So I'm feathering the edge still, just to kind of take away that excess mud off the edge. And one pass. Oh, so you can see we got an empty spot right here. So it could use one more pass real quick. Clean off the edge, gently. You'll tear the paper-faced bead if you're not careful. And that's good enough. There is some porosity in here, but that's gonna fill in on the second coat. It's better to leave your bead full than to take too much out. So if we look at it like this, we can see it's actually pretty full, and we really don't wanna press much harder and take more out than that. Stuff like this, you're probably better to just leave on there and sand after, but if you want, you can kind of try and tune it up. Now I just got a couple little spots to sand. And when I do the tops of the corner bead, so something I didn't do was scrape it off first. That'll stop you from having any unpleasant little nubs in there. But when I do the tops of the corner bead, I set up my bench so that I can do both at the same time. It's a productivity thing. And I didn't explain that little motion right there. I'll do it on the next side. But feather, finish. All right, here's a little motion I didn't show you guys, but I don't always start at the top of the corner bead. I'll start maybe about ½ an inch down, and you can see this part up here is empty. So what I usually do, I might feather the edge, and then I just collect a little bit of mud right there, and I kind of push. So that gets mud right up into the corner. And now we're gonna do one finish pass. And that's looking pretty good. It looks like I have a little crumb right here that'll have to get taken care of in the sanding, but that is how to coat corner beads. And again, if you want to do a deep dive into corner beads, on my channel I have a corner bead playlist. There's so much information in there. There's a lot of different ways to do this. You'll definitely learn some things there, but this is the basics. So the next thing we have to do is coat corners. So once I have flats, butt joints, and corner beads all coated, that's when I will do inside corners. And this is if you're doing it by hand. I do have actually fancier tools that I use for doing inside corners. I have videos about those if you're interested. But the general idea when doing corners is you do one side at a time. So I get a little bit of mud on my blade here, and I'm just gonna do a couple feet of each one to give you guys an idea of how this works. So feather my edge, but I'm actually gonna be kind of careful here to not totally gouge into that flat. Oh, never mind, I'll just gouge into it. Usually I wait for these to be a little bit drier. I just coated it right before this, but whatever. So feather that edge, and then it should be one more pass, gently. And that gets you your one side of the corner. So let's see if I can salvage this somehow. That's slightly better. The reason we do one side at a time is if I was to try and coat, let's say this side, there's no way for me to not gouge out the corner I just did. So you just wait. Do it the next day, and then you won't have a mess. You won't mess up your inside corners. Okay, now we're gonna talk about the three-way corners. I look at these like it's kind of a road. Each one is like a road going into the center, with this being the dividing line. So we just did the left-hand side. In order to get these to turn out right, I will need to do the left-hand side of each one of these. So this is, again, the left-hand side going in here. We're just gonna do one side. Feather, finish, and then we're gonna do the same thing here, just the left-hand side. And you might be thinking, but now I've just gouged out this side, right? You can see, just like I said, once I do that, I wreck the other side. But when I come back the next day and do the right-hand side, I fill that little spot in. So it's just a system. One day, do one side. The next day, when it's dry, do the other side, and it fills in the lines you left. You'll get to see that in day 3. And next, the last thing you do on your second day is just coat your screws again. Just put it on, take it off. Put it on, take it off. Okay, so that is day 2 of taping drywall. We're just putting a first coat over top of everything and doing one side of the inside corners and a second coat on screws. I hope you'll join me for day 3, where you'll see how we kind of finish the whole coating process in preparation for everybody's favorite day 4 sanding. Anyways, you guys, that's all there is to it. Again, if you want more detail, do a deep dive into the videos. There's lots there. I want to say thanks for watching, and as always, I hope your projects are going well, but I hope you're doing even better. Till the next one.